Hello everybody, this is Fernando for the latest Cryptids and Monsters video. Alright, let's go ahead and let's do the next chapter here, chapter 8 from the Occult Investigator, Real Cases from the Files of X Investigations book by Bob Johnson. Once again, a really good book. I highly recommend reading it. I have the link included below if you wanted to read it for free, and then that way you'll get to catch up with all the other chapters as well. This one, chapter 8, has to do with a fascinating link associated with witches. So definitely something that I've talked about here on my channel in the past. And on top of this, it apparently ties into the Salem witch trials or the Salem witch error. Fascinating stuff. When I was reading just very briefly some of this information, I thought to myself, definitely something that a lot of my fans here will enjoy. So I'm going to do part 1 of this chapter, and then I'll save part 2 for the other one. And as always, I'll give my own thoughts and opinions on it afterward. But in this case, chapter 8 is called The Salem Witch Connection. So let's go ahead and let's talk about that here. And then I'd love to hear what your own thoughts are as well. So here's how it goes. Sylvana was well aware that X Investigations never mixed business with pleasure. We had an agreement since we began the paranormal investigative team with Vincent's detective firm that we would not take any friends or relatives' cases no matter how much they begged for our help. We knew from past experience that the second we would advise on a paranormal matter and even hint that the victim may have some psychological or personality problem, all hell would break loose and our relationship would quickly be in jeopardy. But Sylvana always knew how to manipulate my weaknesses. She'd pout and then sleek around the room suggestively or hold onto my arm and tilt her head just enough to have to look up to me with her huge brown eyes. I knew trouble was brewing one day when she started to circle my desk in that familiar cat-like prowl, so I cut her short. "What is it, Sylvana? What bizarre request are you positioning yourself to hit me with?" I asked. "Why, Robert, what makes you think I'm doing that? I'm simply a little bored, and I think we should take a trip out of the city, that's all," she answered. "Bored? We have piles of case materials that must be filed into the computer, cross-checked with other paranormal and occult databases. It will take us weeks to get this stuff in order. How can you be bored?" And so Sylvana played the I want to go on an adventure game, which meant that she needed to tell me something very important but was a little afraid of how I'd react. After I ignored her for about 15 minutes, she suddenly broke down and blurted out, "Robert, I have a friend who needs our help badly. He has been to a strange place and has had contact with a coven of witches and an old murderous house, and he has had many problems and does not know what to do." And then, hold on, I said. I was about to give her the company line about not getting involved with friends and relatives when I saw tears welling up in her eyes. Sylvana had been the sheepish coquette before and won me over, but it was always a little game. This time she looked genuinely concerned and upset. I asked her to come out for a coffee and to discuss what was bothering her and her friend. It started to rain heavily as we left our building on 2nd Avenue and raced to the coffee shop on the corner a block away. I hoisted my raincoat up over both of our heads and pulled Sylvana's arm along to keep pace with me as we ran and jumped the quickly filling puddles that are Manhattan potholes. We sat in a booth near the window watching the unfortunate New Yorkers without umbrellas racing for cover or the more amusing few who were trying to hail a cab. "So what's the problem? Who is this person and what kind of mess is he into?" I asked. Sylvana lowered her head and explained that she had met Mario in her citizenship class some years ago. He was an Italian immigrant and they had become close friends once they found out that they had a common interest in the occult. Mario was fascinated with Sylvana's keen perceptive abilities, and Sylvana was mesmerized by Mario's seemingly endless stories of Italian witchcraft and curses known as the Stregas. Although Sylvana had also immigrated from Europe, hers and Mario's cultures were very different, and they constantly compared notes about each other's paranormal and occult myths and folklore. Sylvana said she could recall the vampire legends so common in her region, and Mario would counter with the tales of the Mezzosomo, a half-man specter that would float into the village homes in search of infants to steal for demonic rituals. If anyone looked at the Mezzosomo face to face, the whole family would be cursed and the child would be taken. Mario told me that one of his aunts saw the monster and her hair immediately turned completely gray, Sylvana said. I was almost ready to say to Sylvana that it sounded like Mario had quite an imagination and that whatever problem he may have had was probably a result of an overactive fantasy and not a paranormal event. I also wanted to remind her that as paranormal investigators, we had experienced a number of cases that turned out to be nothing more than the fabrications of bored people who told us all manner of spooky tales and unexplained events simply to stir up a little excitement in their otherwise mundane lives. We didn't have the time or the budget for wild goose chases, so we needed to be certain that whatever we investigated warranted our services. And to add to the problem, our benefactor, Vincent, often rolled his eyes when we returned from a case with either no payment or no concrete results. This ain't no Ghostbusters movie we're doing here. This is Office Space, phones, travel. Everything costs money, he'd say. So I tried once again to impress on Sylvana that whatever Mario's problem was, it had better be worth our efforts to solve it. But she was ready for me. She mentioned two things that she knew would get my attention and most likely persuade me to take on the case. Salem, Massachusetts, and the old Joshua Ward House and book company in the center of that town. Being no stranger to Salem, a favorite old haunt of mine, if you will, I was delighted with the idea of returning to the city of witches to see old friends. Despite the overhyped tourism that unendingly touts Salem's notorious history as the center of witchcraft and the witch trials purported to end in burnings at stake, many practicing Wiccans and numerous magical organizations have settled in the New England city. What's more, I've always detected a certain genuine vibe of the mysterious and occult whenever I visited. Sylvana had also felt Salem's odd attraction during previous cases and even on pleasure trips. If you love Halloween as I do, Salem's the place to go during that holiday. It's almost Halloween all year round, and I always welcome a chance to visit. What had happened to Mario in the New England town and how the Ward House figured into it was intriguing. The legend of the Ward House is steeped in murder and ghosts. The place is supposed to have been built on the site of the home of a crazy high sheriff, Giles Corey, who in the late 17th century was responsible for many of the Salem's witch trials. Legend tells that the sheriff was so reviled in the community that his family burned him in the cellar of the house to prevent his body from being desecrated. Salem legend also tells of a man suspected of witchcraft who the sheriff crushed to death with stones. This fellow reportedly cursed the magistrate to haunt the grounds as an earthbound spirit for eternity. Numerous ghostly sightings have been reported at the Ward House in all areas of the building. Reports of a twisted-necked woman floating on the front stairs who intentionally frightens visitors away have been documented, as has a sighting of a dark outline of a disheveled and bearded old man who can be seen in the window, even from the street during broad daylight. I myself visited there one afternoon some years ago, and I sensed an extremely eerie and malevolent feeling surrounding the house. But being so inclined, spooked and fascinated all at once, I never missed a chance to go back to see whether I could discover anyone or anything new about the infamous house and grounds. I finally gave in to Sylvana and asked for the particulars about Mario and what she wanted us to do. She said she could tell me his story, but she thought it would be better if we met with Mario so that he could explain the misfortunes that had resulted from his Salem encounter. Robert, I can tell you the bad things. You know, I have told you many times before bad things that we should fix, but my friend is very, very in trouble in his mind because of the curse and the ghost, Sylvana said. The curse and the ghost, I asked. When are you going to tell me about these curses and ghosts? Maybe if you would have mentioned them from the beginning, we could have saved a lot of time. I said silently. The truth was that by this time I was hooked. Just the thought of revisiting Salem was appealing, and even if Mario's problem didn't warrant our time or effort, the mere thought of a new case involving the Ward House was enough. There have been numerous ghost hunting expeditions and some fairly convincing results, but we had never had the opportunity to get X-Investigation's contribution about the Ward House recognized in the world of paranormal research. This was a chance I've been waiting for. Mario was not a nut, despite my preconception that he was probably a nervous type with new age leanings and crystal pendants hanging from his neck. He was anything but odd looking. When Sylvana introduced us at her apartment a few nights later, I was happy to see that the gregarious Mario, a swarthy young man in his mid-30s, appeared to be quite stable. He joked from the get-go about us being crazy Ghostbusters and how all good teams needed balance, me being the brains and Sylvana being the beauty. Of course, Sylvana chimed in and reminded Mario that she was in fact the one who had managed to get him through their immigration exams and that her contributions to the X-Investigations teams was a lot more than pulchritude. Ah yes, but that's just my Italian charm showing through to you, Bella Sylvana, Mario said. Mario's jovial attitude quickly changed when I asked him what had happened in Salem and why it was so necessary to involve us. His face took on a pained expression as he put down his glass of wine to begin his story. As he looked at Sylvana, she took his hand and told him that he could feel comfortable telling us anything. We have heard and seen many strange things, Mario. You came to me for help because you trust me and we will help you, but you must tell us everything, every detail, so we are prepared for whatever we may encounter, Sylvana said. Mario then relaxed and told us how his ordeal had begun. He was convinced by a girl he had met at a learning center annex seminar that they should drive up to Salem one weekend to explore that town. Mario said Julie was very much into astrology and tarot cards, and she had told him about Wiccan practices. Although she didn't consider herself a witch, she was curious and had read many books on the subject. Julie had always wanted to visit Salem, and when she heard Mario's homeland stories of Italian witches and occult beliefs, she convinced him that they would be perfect travel buddies for a jaunt up to Witch Central. I thought it would be lots of fun, and she was very attractive, so I figured, what the hell, Mario told us. The trip started out normally enough. The new friends stayed at the Salem Inn, central to the town's tourist trade, and began to explore their surroundings. Julie was in her glory, visiting the Witches Museum, the Crowhaven Corner Occult Shop, and the many other not-so-genuine spooky stores that profit from Salem's infamous history. Julie was absorbing all that she could of the local lore, specifics of the Wiccan rituals, spells, and stories of luminaries like Lori Cabot. The couple took an evening ghost tour of the town's cemeteries and haunted houses. Mario said that one of the women on the tour, a middle-aged woman with long silver-gray hair who happened to be a local resident, took an immediate liking to Julie, discussing Salem witchcraft and how most visitors only see the surface of Salem's deep occult roots. According to Mario, Julie was mesmerized by the woman, seemingly forgetting that Mario was even with her. Throughout the tour, this mysterious woman appeared to be more concerned with telling Julie about her local coven and the ancient and secret rituals that the group performed than with the tour at hand. She told Julie that at the time of the year during the summer solstice, the group was particularly powerful and could perform outstanding spell castings, the likes of which most people could never imagine. Mario admitted to us that he was annoyed that Julie had ignored him the minute a real Salem witch got her attention. I wanted to get Julie's attention back, so I interrupted their conversation and started talking about the Italian witches. Julie had heard some of those stories, but not the more serious ones, like when the Stregas give the evil eye curse that is the most powerful curse in the world, Mario said. I told the gray-haired witch on the tour that the Italian witches had practiced hundreds of years before any witch had come to Salem. I knew I'd made that lady mad, but I was upset myself. By this time, the ghost tour had made its way to the Joshua Ward house, where Mario said his problems began. The group stood across the road from the house in order to get a perspective of the land on which it was located. As the tour guide was telling the story of the infamous sheriff and how he had been responsible for the hanging of many suspected Salem witches, Mario said he had made a comment under his breath about the gray-haired woman stealing Julie's attention. He said that when the tour guide noted that many witches had met their fate at the gallows, he couldn't control what leapt from his mouth. I said that the sheriff must have missed one witch because she was standing right next to me here. I guess I made the comment because I was mad at her for butting into my nice weekend with Julie, Mario admitted. He said that the stranger quickly shot a cold glance at him with shiny black eyes that sent chills up his spine. As the tour guide moved the group closer to the house, the older woman said to Julie that perhaps she would like to visit one of her coven ceremonies that were taking place that very weekend. Julie jumped at the invitation and then finally acknowledged Mario's presence, taking his hand as they crossed the street to get closer to the Joshua Ward house. Julie, Mario, and their new acquaintance, who never revealed her name, were at the back of the group, and as the guide gave her talk, the gray-haired witch suggested that the three of them go to the back of the house because that's where many of the sightings have been recorded, and it was supposedly over the exact spot where the sheriff's body has been buried. So the three sneaked away from the group and quietly made their way to the back of the house across a dark driveway littered with leaves. Mario said that the older woman was acting strange, positioning herself in front of Julie as they walked to the back of the house. Once they got to a particular spot that seemed familiar to the gray-haired witch, she moved Julie to her left side, saying that that was where she would get the best view. At the same time, she suspiciously maneuvered Mario to a spot about 2 feet behind the women and facing the back of the house at a 90-degree angle. "You can get the best view from here of the shape of the sheriff's ghost," the old witch said to Julie. When Mario asked why she had placed him in such an odd spot, the woman said that she had advised people many times before, and that if he wanted to see things other people hadn't, he shouldn't question her motives. Mario decided he already caused enough friction, so he decided to be quiet and play along. Then this crazy woman closed her eyes and started some kind of weird chanting in a very low voice. Julie thought this was very cool, and she smiled at me while we watched as the woman threw her head back, stretched out her arms with her palms upward, and kept on chanting. Mario said he told us that he was getting very spooked by the woman's actions, and he wanted to get Julie away from her. He said that although they were not far from the group, they felt as they were being pushed further and further away. As the woman continued chanting, they became more aware they were somehow being transported, not to another place, but to another time. Mario described the sensation. It felt like one of the crazy movies, like when you see time moving really, really fast in a blur, and you see seasons change in front of your eyes, or flowers grow and then die on a split second. Sylvana and I acknowledged each other's glance. We had both been witness to other cases where clients similarly described out-of-body experiences like Mario's, but they were always self-generated. Based on what Mario had told us, the woman had either hypnotized the couple or produced some kind of spell that created a feeling of time change. I asked Mario whether he had felt he was at the precise moment. He said that he wasn't sure whether he had fallen asleep or was dreaming or if he was actually in another time, but he thought his surroundings looked quite different from the back area of the house when he and Julie had first walked to the back. I cannot explain it too well, but we were not in the same place when that happened to us. That witch did something to me and Julie, Mario said. And then that's it. I guess that's a good place to close part 1 here when it comes to chapter 6, the Salem witch connection from the book Occult Investigator, real cases from the files of X investigation. So let's talk about that part here. First off, lots of interesting stuff, right, when it comes to witches. So it looks like in this case, there's this friend of Sylvana named Mario who apparently got into some really deep trouble associated with, as his words described, a real Salem witch from that area, which is another thing too. The area there associated with Salem, Massachusetts. It's on my bucket list. It's definitely a place that I would love to go check out one time in the future. See what it shows there. Maybe like I don't know if you can stay overnight there, but at least take a tour, maybe some ghost tours at night, stuff like that. I've heard from other friends that have gone there, and they say, yeah, it's very busy there, especially when you go to Halloween. You should avoid it, basically. But otherwise, still, it's very busy throughout the year, and that it definitely has lots of places to check out. So if anyone has any more info on that end, on a local level, if you've been to Salem, Massachusetts, let me know what it's like. But by far the most interesting thing of part 1 is something I never heard about, the Joshua Ward house. It sounds very fascinating. It sounds like definitely a place that I would love to visit, maybe do an investigation. I have to be very careful, of course, associated with anything involving witches or anything involving, I guess, what's about to be described within the house itself. It does not look like those are good entities, like those are really bad ones. that happen to be there. But otherwise, the old Joshua Ward house definitely sounds like something that would fascinate me to be able to go see and then take pictures, do AVPs and so on, see if any evidence can be captured there. If anyone has gone there too, to the old Joshua Ward house, let me know. Love to hear what your thoughts are with regards to that too. And then finally, it looks like we have Mario and I guess his girlfriend or his date at the time, Julie, running into a real life witch there at that guide, at that tour that was happening, and how she's almost taking them to another location on purpose, and in this case putting her into some kind of spell. Fascinating stuff. So let's see how part 2 plays out afterward. But again, any more info on a local level, Salem, Massachusetts, Old Joshua Ward house, maybe any other info involving witches, let me know. All right, everybody, thanks again as always. Take care.